Hey, welcome to my channel. I talk about knitting, crochet, books, sometimes ADHD, sometimes other things. And today I want to talk about the Betty McKnit 6-Day Blanket. I want to share my view on what's been happening and my take on it, because I think there are some things that we're just not really discussing very much in relation to this whole drama. First of all, what I'm working on, I'm just doing a beanie, just in case you're like me and when people are working on stuff, you always want to know what they're working on in the video. So I'm finishing it up now. It's going to look like this. It's such an easy pattern. I really recommend it. It's a free pattern, which I will link below. And basically you just do a magic circle and then you just crochet back and forth, doing a half double crochet into the magic loop until you get to the point you want, and then you flip the brim over and you're done. Really recommend it. I kind of want to see if I can do some kind of pink edging or decoration on it at the end. So 6-Day Blanket. Betty McKnit is a designer who designs 6-Day Blanket. She's done a lot of other designs as well, but that seems to be the one that's really taken off. It's really popular on social media, partly because it's just lovely to look at, and you can, like, lots of people do the videos where it's kind of like every day they show their progress by unrolling it, which are always very, like, I find them very soothing to watch. But I think it's also very popular on social media because it's got that element of a challenge to it. You know, can you do it in 6 days? Like, we've got Christmas coming up, and after I finish off a few of my other projects, I kind of want to do a 6-day blanket over Christmas because I know I'm going to have the time to work on it. So that's why it's popular, and it's also free, available as a free pattern. What's been going on with the blanket is people had someone, a crocheter, tried to do the blanket from the blog post and found that it wasn't written in a very accessible way for them. I think from what I've seen, because a lot of this has been scrubbed from the internet now, they mentioned that they have dyslexia and ADHD, and they found the pattern difficult to follow. They contacted Betty McKnit and said, hey, I struggle with this pattern for these reasons. Would you consider making it more accessible? And she said no. And the thing is, she has made it available free on multiple platforms in multiple formats. So I get it. And it's an old pattern, you know, and I can imagine she wants to put her energy and effort into something else. What that person then did was go away and rewrite the pattern in a more accessible terms for them, put it into what I think was a Google Doc, and share it for free. They didn't make any money off that, and they didn't put their social media handles or anything on it, so I don't think they were necessarily getting social clout from it either. But the reason this has become an issue is obviously Betty McKnit was making money from it. She was selling the ad-free version of the pattern as well. Just people who want to do the free version of the pattern but don't want the adverts, they're just going to go to the more accessible version that is available. So she's losing out on ad revenue as well. So I think that that's where a lot of the outrage at this behavior has come from. The crocheter who created the more accessible version of the pattern has been accused of being a pattern thief. There are people who feel very strongly about this. Betty McKnit did contact them and ask them to take it down, which they, as far as I can tell, immediately did. Is the 6-day style blanket accessible or not? I would argue that there is an economic tariff to using this pattern if you're neurodiverse, have access needs, and the adverts are an issue for you. We call it the ADHD tax, where you just end up paying more for things because you either forget to do it, like, you know, you might forget to cancel a subscription, or you might forget that you've got vegetables in the fridge that need to be used and then you have to chuck them out and buy them again. But it is also in that a lot of more accessible features are hidden behind a paywall. And it does feel like this is it. People are kind of saying there was an accessible version available if you pay for it. This discussion has now moved on into people speculating about the motives of the crocheter who wrote the new pattern, and also kind of drawing conclusions about what this says about crochet community and how new crocheters interact with designers. Cinnamon Knits did a really, really good wrap up of, you know, kind of what was said and everything, and she comes from a similar place to me in that she is combined type ADHD. I don't think she's dyslexic or anything, neither am I, to be clear, and I think she does a really, really good job of laying out what happened, who said what and everything, but I do disagree with the majority of her conclusion. This is not a response video to her, but I feel like I'm going to reference a few of the conclusions she comes to very, very briefly, which reflect what I've seen in bigger discussions on Reddit, on Facebook, on Twitter, things like that. Hey, just took a break to try on the hat, which is why my hair is now a bit flat, and I think I've finished it, and I have attached the seam, and I am now doing a little pink border. So that's why you might see flashes of a different colour wool. The conclusions that people are coming to now, and where the discussion has moved on to, is there's quite a lot of people suggesting that the crocheter who created the new version of the pattern has disrespected Betty McKnit, but also that it reflects a wider kind of neediness, more demandingness on behalf of new crocheters. And I think that this is kind of falling into the lines of a kind of age divide is how it seems to be seen. There's a lot of people talking about how this is representative of a new type of crocheter, someone who's only been crocheting for a few years, who expects everything to be handed to them, essentially. And you can kind of see this in the Cinema Knits video. One of her kind of big lines from that is, Betty McKnit is not your mum. And with that, she just talks about how it's not Betty McKnit's responsibility to rewrite the pattern to make it accessible for every single person out there. And this is also reflected in the online discussions I'm seeing around this, where people are like, new crocheters or people who haven't been crocheting for long want everything handed to them. They want everything spelled out. They won't do anything for themselves, etc., etc. And basically that they're putting too much of a demand on Betty McKnit to make this pattern accessible for them. And it definitely feels like it's, when people say new crocheters, it feels very much like that is shorthand for Gen Z or Gen Z. A lot of people obviously got into crochet during the pandemic, and it is very noticeable how crochet patterns have changed. You know, like I use a lot of patterns like the one I'm doing right now, where it's like literally like less than 300 words, and that's fine by me. Like that's how that's how I've learned. That's what I feel comfortable with. I find patterns that do spell out every single line of what to do by line actually a little bit confusing, and I struggle to follow them and struggle to keep my place. Whereas if you tell me, okay, repeat that for like 2 inches, that I can do. So there has been a big change in patterns, and ironically, I think Betty McKnit's pattern represents the new way of doing patterns, in that every single stitch pretty much is spelt out. So that in itself is interesting, that people are saying, oh, this is an example of a new type of crocheter, someone who started crocheting recently, who expects everything to be written out for them. But it's like, this pattern spells it out for them. Like that wasn't really ever the accessibility need that was being talked about here. People have clearly got this bee in their bonnet, and then they're using this as an excuse, I think, to jump on that. To be clear, I'm not saying Cinema Knits is doing that. I'm just using her like phrase of Betty McKnit is not your mum as an example to show that I think that there is an age component here, and a view of new knitters as wanting so much stuff. But it's like, Betty McKnit wrote this pattern quite a while ago. She spelled out every single stitch in it as far as I can tell. That was not the thing that was being questioned. The thing that was being questioned was there are some errors in it, which it's like with free patterns, you get errors, and also the ads being distracting. Like those were the issues, but people are very much making this a conversation about, oh, they want everything spelled out for them. And I think that there is like almost a little bit of a gatekeepy thing here as well. And I know that gatekeeping is like so overused as a phrase, so I'm going to try and go lightly with it. But basically it's this idea of like a lot of people saying, maybe this person just wasn't a good enough crocheter to follow the pattern. But once again, we kind of come back to this thing of like, it almost doesn't matter skill level wise. The person who did this and the people who are supporting them are very much like, no, this is just not good accessibility. And the thing is, like, we do have a lot of tools now that people can use. And this is where I really think it's this sign of it. It's not exactly an age thing or a new generation of crocheters being more demanding. There is also a very long history, just as long as the history of crochet and knitting, longer even, of disabled people. And I view myself as disabled due to my neurodiversity, and that's how I'm using the phrase here. Disabled people creating tools and workaround and hacks to be able to engage in non-disabled life. And I think that that is actually, in my mind, what we're seeing here. I think that we're seeing someone with a disability or neurodiversity unable to engage with something as it currently stands, asking for help, not getting the help, which once again, I think good that they asked. I don't necessarily hold like negative opinions about Betty McKnit that she decided not to do this. Like it is extra work for her. Not getting the help that they asked for, creating their own version of it. There is such a history of that. It's something that neurodiverse people and disabled people, we've always done that. We've always found different ways to engage with stuff. And people saying like, well, not every pattern is for you. And it's like, yes, but it's part of the community. This particular pattern, there is a community built up around it. People post on social media about it. You make a 6-day star blanket, other people will have made one. You can have nice chats about it. You can discuss what colorways you used. Yes, there are other star blankets out there, but it doesn't have the same community and the same connection, which a lot of us are looking for when we bring our crochet and knitting online. We are looking for other people who like this as well to engage with about it. That's why I don't buy the idea of like, there are other star blankets. It's like, okay, but this person, if this person just wanted a star blanket, they could just go off and do a different star blanket. They want the connection and the community that has built up around this specific pattern. And when they struggled to engage with that community, they found a different access point for themselves. And to me, that is the opposite of this kind of almost like lazy young person kind of view that seems to be approached, where it's like it's new crocheters who are unskilled and who are too demanding and they want too much. It's like, no, they actually, this is the opposite of that. They did what I wish I did more, which is when they came up against a barrier, they found a way around it and they shared that tool. And that is another feature of the disabled and neurodiverse communities, in the tradition of disabled people finding ways to access areas that are close to them and sharing that knowledge with their fellow disabled and neurodiverse people. This person essentially created a tool that opened up the 6-day star blanket to a lot of other disabled people who maybe before just thought, oh, okay, I just can't do that one. Like, that's not for me. I don't agree with the way they did that and the way they approached it. And I think, and I'll kind of go into what I think would have been a better outcome of all of this. What I've tried to do with this video is to sort of talk about the reactions to what happened and my interpretation of what happened. I'm deliberately avoiding getting into a kind of thing of, you know, and then this person said that person and so, and I know that there have been accusations that people have been ganging up on Betty McKnit, which I think is really horrible. Like, she has a right to put out a limited product. Like, that's her right. I think it is a massive minefield for designers in terms of how do you make sure that your patterns are accessible to everyone. I don't think that this was a premeditated attempt to take down a designer. I've seen people say that ageism is coming into play here because Betty McKnit isn't like a kind of like the sort of designer who's like trending on TikTok or Instagram or whatever, that people feel safer going after her. I don't necessarily know that that's it either. Like, she has written a pattern that does fantastically on social media. She has written a pattern that is incredibly detailed and follows the traditions of like the new patterns of being step by step. She's created videos for it. Like, I don't think people are going after her because she represents the old type of crochet at all. But at the same time, I also don't think that this has been handled very well by the person who created the version of the pattern. Like, I completely get it, why they did this. I personally believe that they had good motivations in terms of wanting to make this themselves, understanding that a lot of people weren't able to make it, wanting to make that more accessible to everyone. You know, they did ask Betty McKnit if she would alter the pattern first, which I do think like should not be ignored. But at the same time, she does make money from this pattern and that is her business. And while I personally feel like it would be nice if there was like, you know, if we could remove capitalism from the world of crochet, as it were, we're not going to anytime soon. People need to make their livings, and this is how she makes her living. She is losing money by having this separate pattern up there. Would it be really intense if I also did some pink striping, do you think, along the actual ribbing of the beanie? I feel like that could be really, really cool, but I also feel like it could just be like loads of extra work. I'm gonna leave it for now, but like, let me know if you think like having maybe I'll try and do one and we'll see how that goes. Anyway, yeah, sorry, off topic. There is a question of how accessible designers should make their patterns. I mean, ultimately, it comes down to it comes down to a couple of things, doesn't it? It comes down to the designer's preference for how they want to do business. If they want to create patterns that can be used by lots of people, you know, enjoyed by lots of people, and if they want to see their pattern go viral and be really beloved and everything, it makes sense to make it accessible for as many people as possible. Like that's just good, like, business sense, I think. At the same time, you have to weigh up the kind of the cost that comes with actually like making sure it is accessible, you know, not just in size inclusiveness and having to kind of like design for that, grade for that, etc. But also, yeah, can neurodiverse people interact with the pattern? Can disabled people interact with the pattern? All of that stuff does take time, does take effort. I think a lot of people will be very quick to be like, yeah, well, you should make the effort. And it's like, yeah, agreed. But also, like, if you are a small business with a limited amount of time, and you have to kind of decide for yourself, how much is it worth it to me to spend all of this extra time when I know putting out the pattern as it stands at the minute, not size inclusive, not accessible, but can be made by majority of people, that might be enough for me. So I think that that's like, as a designer, you have to decide what's important to you and which customers are important to you and who you think is going to want to interact with your product and everything. I think it's really interesting, some of the conversations that have been had around should designers recruit neurodiverse pattern testers specifically to read it through of like, is this does this work for someone who's neurodiverse? I think that could be really interesting, the same way that now it's a lot more common for designers to have plus size pattern testers, and to kind of like acknowledge that not all bodies are the same, and it would be really cool if it was a bit more open, if we could all acknowledge that not everyone interacts with the world in the same way. So I think that could be cool, but that's not what happened here, is it? This is an older pattern, in that it's been up for a while, and what should Betty McKnit have done exactly? It's already a successful pattern. I would assume as a designer she has other things that she wants to kind of focus on, other patterns that she's excited about. I know she releases quite a lot of patterns, and I can imagine there's a lot of designers in the same boat, maybe designers who just weren't even aware of accessibility needs before this, or weren't aware that they were creating a pattern that might not work for everyone, but want to be inclusive, want to cater to as many people as possible. And that's where there is that kind of element of, if I was a knitwear designer, and I'm very much not, for many reasons, mostly talent, but also like I do not have the kind of the mindset for that, I do not have the energy for that, etc., etc. I would definitely be looking at recruiting neurodiverse testers. I don't think I would like let a pattern live and die on that, because, you know, it's already a bit of a struggle to recruit testers, I think, unless you're like a big name on Instagram. Getting neurodiverse testers as well, I think, could be quite a challenge. And also the fact is that a lot of neurodiverse people experience neurodiversity in different ways, and what I might pass as like, this is an accessible pattern, it works for me, would not work for other people. So it is a minefield. I've done the pink stripe, by the way. What do we think? I'm going to do a few more, see how I feel about it. I've got a lot of this pink wool, so I might as well make use of it. This is where the responsibility of neurodiverse people and disabled people to set a standard and kind of like help make things accessible, I think, comes in. And no one should have to do anything if they don't have the energy for it. But if you care enough about something and you want to make it accessible, I do think that this person's instinct to do it themselves is a good one. But I think it should be done in collaboration with the designer. So if you are someone who has a pattern that you really want to make, it's not currently accessible to you, I can imagine you might be feeling like you don't want to reach out to the designer now after what's happened with all of this, but I would still encourage you to do that. And if you're a designer, I encourage you to be open to that, to say, oh, if I've released a pattern in the past that was not accessible and you as a neurodiverse person feel like you might want to rewrite it and create an accessible version of it, I would love that. I think that could be a really positive thing. And to me, like, and I don't know the discussions that were going on, I know a lot of it's been screenshot, but a lot of it hasn't and everything, but to me it's like, why didn't Betty McKnit do that? When this person reached out to her and said it, why not say, hey, would you be able to create an accessible version for me? And enter into a discussion about that. And why didn't the person who created the pattern offer it to Betty McKnit first? You know, if you've got someone who's created an accessible version of your pattern, why not ask to host it on your website? Why not ask to add it into the PDF that you're already putting out there? I don't know if this conversation was had. It sounds like Betty McKnit just reached out and was like, can you take it down? But to me, it's like, I think in that situation, it would have actually been better just to say, hey, can I, and maybe she did, but to just say, hey, can I host this with the rest of it so that there is an accessible version available for people? And the thing is, like, the person created it for free, and Betty McKnit is gaining monetarily from it, and maybe they could have even maybe worked out something where it's like, everyone, for every download of the accessible version of the pattern, maybe like 10% goes to the person who rewrote it to be more accessible, or 10% of the profits from the PDFs that are sold where the person's indicated, I want the accessible version, maybe 10% of those profits go to a neurodiverse support foundation or something. That way, Betty McKnit has opened up her audience to so many more people. So many people can access it, and the person who put all this work in could have actually benefited from it as well. This is like where a disconnect seems to have opened up, and I think a lot of the kind of online discourse is kind of getting in the way almost of these kind of conversations. But I do hope in the future, if something like this happened, that the designer might just be open to be like, okay, cool, you've rewritten the pattern in a more accessible way, I will host that with my normal pattern. Anyone who indicates that they are downloading this pattern specifically to get the accessible version, I will give you 5% of it, or I will donate 5% of it, or 10%, or whatever. I get that there was like a boundary crossed because her permission wasn't asked and everything, and then they hosted it separately and stuff, but I just feel like this could have a happier ending as a story. And I definitely feel like we're going to be seeing a lot more of this in the knitting and crochet world. People who are neurodiverse and disabled are finding each other, are reaching out to each other, are building community online in a much more robust way than it has traditionally existed. Traditionally, a lot of knitting and crochet was offline, and you might be like one neurodiverse person in a group of neurotypical people. Whereas now you can connect with like 4 other neurodiverse people, discuss with them, hey, how did you find this pattern? Yeah, I struggled with it. What did you do? How did you like solve it and everything? There's going to be more and more of this, of communities, and I think plus size communities as well, hacking patterns, as it were, to make it more accessible for them. And I think designers can either take advantage of that and say that they are open to it and say, I don't have the capacity to work on this right now, but if retroactively, if you want to redo my pattern and have me host it so everyone has access to it, I'm open to that. I think there's potential for that, but I think there's also potential for this to go very badly wrong if everyone, like, if the drama keeps kind of building around it, if everyone is attributing really like negative intentions to anyone who does this. So I am really interested to see what happens and how this goes, and I think that this could be for the betterment of our communities, to be honest, and of our crafting, but we'll see. So I've done the 2 ink lines and I really like that. I think I might just go around and do all of it like this, but I'm probably not going to work on this anymore today. So let me know what you think, and yeah, let me know what you think of all the stuff I've talked about. I'm not like looking to like attack anyone or criticize anyone on this. I'm just looking to give my perspective that I've not seen represented as much in some of the discussions that are being had. I very much recommend Cinema Knit's roundup. I think she did a really great job of looking at it. I've seen some less good roundups, which I'm not going to be linking to. And I've seen a lot of people attribute very bad faith on both sides, assume Betty McKnit hates neurodiverse people, assume that this person was trying to steal her hard work. I don't think that's what's happening. I think we're existing in a middle ground where everyone had vaguely good intentions and it's just got twisted in a really negative way. But maybe you know something I don't know. Maybe you saw something online that would change my mind on that, and I'd love to hear about it. All right, thanks for listening. Yeah, let me know about the hat. Like, subscribe, just do whatever you want. Bye.